January 1944. The snowbound steppes of the Ukrainian front groaned under the weight of winter. German Panzer IV Ausfuhrer H crews scanned the horizon. With 80 mm of frontal armor, they believed themselves safe. After all, the once feared T-34-76 had shown its age at Kursk. German 75 mm guns could still penetrate it, while the Tiger and Panther reigned supreme. For many Panzer men, the Soviet wonder tank of 1941 was history. But then through the mist, silhouettes emerged. At first they looked like ordinary T-34s. Yet as they drew closer, the difference was undeniable. A massive cast turret, round and towering like a steel fortress, crowned with an unusually long gun barrel. One German officer later admitted, "We knew instantly this was no T-34 we had faced before. It was something entirely new." The rumble of the Soviet V2 diesel engine, 12 cylinders delivering 500 horsepower, shook the frozen air. Then came the crack. An 85 mm ZIS-53 shell, leaving the muzzle at nearly 792 meters per second, screamed across the field. The Panzer IV's 80 mm front plate, once a shield of confidence, shattered. Flames burst skyward, a black plume of smoke curling into the gray sky. A German crew was annihilated in an instant. Over the radio, frantic voices crackled. "Their new gun pierces even our frontal armor. This is a T-34, but armed like a beast." The arrogance born at Kursk evaporated. The Wehrmacht realized it was staring at a predator that could challenge even the Tiger Walk at medium range, and it was appearing in ever-growing numbers. That day was more than a battlefield skirmish. It was a declaration. The Soviets had reborn the T-34 into the T-34-85, a machine no longer just a medium tank, but a predator designed for mass production. With over 22,000 built by war's end, it was not merely an upgrade, it was an industrial nightmare bearing down on the German war machine. After the Battle of Kursk in the summer of 1943, the balance of armored warfare shifted dramatically. The Tiger I, weighing 57 tons with 100 mm of frontal armor, and the Panther, 45 tons with 80-90 mm slope plates, revealed the grim truth. The 76.2 mm F-34 gun of the T-34-76 was hopelessly inadequate at long range. Soviet crews had to close in suicidally to stand a chance, while German 88 mm KWK-36 guns on the Tiger and 75 mm KWK-42 guns on the Panther could punch through a T-34 from over 1,500 meters. One Red Army report lamented, "We no longer hold the initiative. To our men, every advance feels like walking into a killing ground." In this atmosphere of crisis, on October 15, 1943, Stalin convened the State Defense Committee in the Kremlin. He struck the table and issued a stark order. "We need a new tank, with a gun that can kill the Tiger head-on." It was not merely a technical request, but a survival command to Soviet industry. Factories at Gorky, Nizhny Tagil, and Omsk shifted to emergency schedules, working day and night to design a new turret capable of housing an 85 mm gun. The result was the T-34-85. Rather than a half measure, the Soviets built an entirely new cast turret, wide enough for a three-man crew, commander, gunner, and loader. For the first time, the commander was free to command, no longer forced to load or fire, vastly improving battlefield effectiveness. At its core stood the ZSS-53 85mm gun, with a muzzle velocity of 792 mph, capable of piercing 100 of armor at 1,000 meters. Compared to the F-34's 60-70 penetration at half that distance, it was a revolutionary leap. What stunned the Wehrmacht was not only the firepower, it was the philosophy behind it. Strong enough to kill a tiger, simple enough to mass produce. While Germany poured immense resources into fewer than 1,400 Tigers and roughly 6,000 Panthers, the Soviet Union produced over 22,000 T-34 the 85s in just 1944-45. A former Panzer crewman recalled, "We did not just see a new tank. We saw a steel tide rolling toward us." In the summer of 1943, the Battle of Kursk, the largest tank clash in history, laid bare a brutal truth for the Red Army. Across the dust-choked fields, over 6,000 armored vehicles clashed. The once invincible 3476, the hero of Moscow in 1941, now faltered. Against the thick frontal armor of the Tiger I and the optimized slope plates of the Panther, its 76.2 shells bounced harmlessly. A report from the Central Front stated plainly, the effective range of the F-34 gun does not exceed 500 meters against the new Panzers. Losses increase sharply when our crews are forced to close in. German guns, by contrast, ruled the battlefield. The Tiger's 88 KWK-36 could kill a T-34 from 1,500–2,000 meters away. The Panther's 75 KWK-42L70 pierced the T-34's frontal armor at 1,200 meters. These figures meant Soviet tankers had to advance into the death zone just to fire back. Morale wavered. One Soviet tanker recalled, "When the Panzers appeared in the distance, all we could do was pray and keep advancing." Beyond the battlefield, industry faced its own crisis. In 1941–42, the Soviet Union had relocated dozens of factories eastward, rebuilding production under fire. Now Stalin demanded a new design, stronger, deadlier, yet still true to the Soviet formula. Mass-producible, cost-effective, simple to operate. To build a monster like the German Tiger II would have been an economic suicide. The dilemma was stark. Either persist with the outdated T-34 the 76 and suffer catastrophic losses, or quickly field an upgraded version powerful enough to stand against Tigers and Panthers without breaking the industrial backbone of the Soviet war effort. In this crucible, the T-34-85 emerged not merely as a new tank, but as the Soviet Union's only viable answer for survival and victory. To understand why the Wehrmacht was stunned by the T-34-85, one must look closely at its technical details. At its heart, it still carried the V234 diesel engine, a 12-cylinder workhorse producing 500 horsepower. Although its weight rose from 26 to 32 tons, the tank could still achieve 40 kilometers per h on the march, preserving the mobility that had made the T-34 so effective on the wide steppes. Yet the true transformation lay in its armor and turret. Where the T-34-76 had only 45 of frontal protection, the T-34-85 introduced a cast turret with 75–90 of armor, reinforced sides at 75 and a sloped hull plate of 45 angled at 60 degrees, effectively 70–80 in thickness. Against this steel shield, the once feared 75 rounds of the Panzer IV became nearly useless. Even the Tiger, once a symbol of invincibility, now found its 88 gun needing favorable angles to guarantee penetration. The real beastly leap came from its new gun, the 85 ZSS-53. Firing armor-piercing rounds at 792 meters per second, it could punch through 100 of steel at 1,000 meters, something the T-34's older 76.2 F-34 gun could never achieve. This narrowed the deadly gap on the battlefield. Soviet crews could now engage Tigers at medium range, rather than closing suicidally into point-blank distance. The new three-man turret freed the commander from loading duties, allowing him to direct the fight with clearer vision, a critical improvement that brought Soviet tanks in line with Western standards. When compared side by side, the contrasts were stark. The Panzer IV AUSF-H, with its 80 of armor and 75 KWK-40 gun, was relegated to prey status. The Tiger I still posed a threat with its 100 frontal plate and 88 gun capable of piercing over 100 at 1,500 meters. But the T-34-85 could now strike back effectively between 500 and 1,000 meters. The Panther remained a formidable predator, its 80 sloped armor equating to 120 in practice. Yet even here, the Soviets no longer felt helpless. A flank shot could topple the big cat. Finally, the numbers sealed the shock. In just 2 years, 1944-45, the Soviet Union produced more than 22,000 T-34-85s, dwarfing Germany's 1,347 Tiger IVs and 6,000 Panthers. No single supertank could withstand that flood of steel. In the end, the T-34-85 was not an invincible machine, but it achieved a perfect balance of firepower, armor, mobility, and production efficiency. And it was this balance, not any single statistic, that left the Germans stunned as their familiar adversary returned in the shape of a deadly predator. In February 1944, during the Korsun-Shevchenkovsky pocket, mud and melting snow turned the Ukrainian steppe into a vast trap. German forces, mainly Panzer IVs with a handful of Tigers, were encircled. On the frozen roads, German crews spotted what looked like the familiar T-34s charging forward. But as the tanks drew near, shock set in. A massive round turret, a long gun thrusting forward like a steel spear. A German veteran later recalled, "We thought they were the old T-34s, but our 75 shells bounced off. Within minutes, 3 Panzer IVs were destroyed from over a kilometer away." On the Soviet side, Lieutenant Ivan Gnestilov's crew of the 20th Guards Tank Brigade recorded their first combat with the T-34-85 in a diary entry. "We fired at 1,200 meters. A Panzer burst into flames with the very first shot. The crew shouted with joy. At last we had a weapon that matched theirs." Talking. These words captured the sentiment of thousands of Red Army tankers, men who had endured helplessness at Kursk and now for the first time held a gun that could meet the Tiger on equal terms. The Korsun battle was more than a tactical victory. It was the debut of the T-34-85. Though still few in number, these new tanks sowed dread in the German ranks. The Wehrmacht could no longer dismiss the T-34 as an outdated prey. Instead, they faced an adversary both familiar and transformed. mass-produced, dangerous, and reborn as a predator designed to shatter Germany's illusion of armored superiority. In the summer of 1944, the Red Army unleashed Operation Bagration, a thunderous blow that annihilated Germany's Army Group Center in Belarus. Over 2.3 million Soviet troops, backed by thousands of guns, aircraft, and, most crucially, the newly fielded T-34 surged forward. This was no limited debut, as at Korsun. It was a massed unveiling, the upgraded beast rolling across the entire front. On the muddy plains of Belarus, Panzer IVs and Stuggy 3s strained to hold their lines, while Tigers and Panthers were spread thin, like salt grains scattered across a map. The imbalance became obvious. The Panzer IV's 75 rounds were nearly useless against the T-34's 90 turret armor, while the 85 Zeiss S-53 could destroy them from 800 to 1,000 meters away. A German report grimly admitted, "The new T-34s have appeared in large numbers. We have lost the ability to hold any line. Even the once dreaded Tiger I no longer enjoyed invulnerability." At medium ranges, the 85 gun could pierce its frontal armor, something the T-34-76 had never achieved. The Panther, with its sloped armor effectively 120 thick, remained formidable, yet when flanked or caught in broken terrain, it too could be slain with a well-placed shot. And numbers told the greater story. While Germany fielded only a few thousand Panthers and barely over 1,000 Tigers, the Soviets poured tens of thousands of T-34-85s into the fight, overwhelming every sector. The results of Bagration were staggering. In just 2 months, Germany lost 28 divisions, nearly 400,000 men killed, wounded, or captured, along with thousands of tanks and assault guns. The fortified line that Hitler once boasted of as a steel wall crumbled to dust. For German soldiers, the T-34-85 was no longer an occasional menace, but an endless tide of steel. For the Soviets, it was proof that they had not only restored technical parity, but had transformed industrial might into a weapon capable of crushing an entire German army group. The arrival of the T-34-85 did more than alter a few battles. It reshaped the entire course of the Eastern Front. From Kursk, where the T-34-76 had fallen short against Tigers and Panthers, to Operation Bagration, where the T-34-85 spearheaded the destruction of Army Group Center, this tank proved a fundamental principle. Industrial war is not won by superweapons, but by achieving the right balance of power, cost, and numbers. With over 22,000 built in just 1944-45, the T-34-85 became the backbone of the Red Army's drive to Berlin. In the final battles across Poland, Hungary, and especially at the Silo Heights, before the gates of the German capital, thousands of T-34-85 SM surged forward, absorbing direct fire from the feared 88 anti-tank guns, then striking back with their Zeiss S-53 guns, powerful enough to pierce Tigers and force Panthers into caution. For every T-34-85 destroyed, 3 or 4 more rolled forward, embodying the Soviet philosophy of strength through numbers. For Nazi Germany, the T-34-85 was a double shock. It shattered the belief that the Tiger and Panther could preserve technical superiority, and it highlighted the limits of Germany's strained industry. While the Reich poured resources into complex, costly machines, the Soviet Union pursued a more pragmatic path, A tank powerful enough to kill, simple enough to mass produce. It was a formula the Wehrmacht could never match. The strategic lesson of the T-34-85 outlived World War II. It demonstrated that the fusion of sufficient technology with overwhelming production capacity was the true key to modern warfare. After 1945, the 3485 continued to serve in conflicts from Korea and Vietnam to the Middle East, proving that this upgraded beast was not merely a wartime miracle, but a global symbol of the tank doctrine that shaped the modern battlefield. The story of the T-34-85 proves that history is not decided by isolated superweapons, but by machines strong enough to be built in tens of thousands, sweeping empires away in their path. With thicker armor, a stronger gun, and mass production on an industrial scale, the T-34-85 turned the Panzer crew's worst fear into reality, a familiar foe reborn in a far deadlier form. This is more than the tale of a tank. It is a reminder that wars are won by those who combine intellect, industry, and endurance. Join us at Oblivion Archive for more untold Waichuan stories, where every machine, every battle, and every soldier helps us understand how history was truly made.